Hey everybody, David here, and welcome to the ASOG podcast. In this episode, we sit down with the Director of Ideation for Dorman Products, Lester Kovacs. Now, this episode could have gone several different ways. Lucas and I could have spent the entire episode slamming Dorman, but that would have been unfair to Dorman, who did show up for the conversation in good faith. We could have also spent the entire episode pandering to them, and no, they don't sponsor the podcast. We're holding that spot out for Popeye's Chicken, but I think that would have made for a pretty uninteresting conversation. And for what it's worth, I think we took the middle ground. But before we get started, please take a moment to hit the like button if you're watching this on YouTube, and if you like this content, consider subscribing to the channel. If you're listening to this on your favorite podcast listening app, make sure you set to automatically download the latest episode so you never miss an upload. And now, here we go.
Lester, just so you know, I want to make it really clear. David is a bit of a diva. He complains about everything. So
does
just
that make
beware.
you a diva complaining, or does this make you a
Oh, no, that's just one part of it. We're not going to talk about all the other reasons you're a diva, okay? And yes, this is the podcast. I know we make it sound like it's all super professional and stuff, but really, if you want to know the truth of it, it's not. David edits out 90% of the podcast.
90% is accurate.
You guys have you guys formally met yet? You formally met, haven't you?
We have not formally met. I think you both met Rob Nice, and then on the call, I only met you through that call that Rob Nice had set up. He met you at one of the events. I can't remember which one it was, Lucas.
Very cool. Yeah, that was actually at ETI Tool Tech. And Rob had some really cool information and came out. We started talking and you know, I'm not going to lie. Dude from Dorman walks up and starts talking and you're like, hold up. I don't say that in a mean way. I'm just saying Dorman has a reputation, but I hear you're fixing it, right? Is that what's up?
I've been here for quite some time, and I feel like we've partnered with a lot of good technicians that have given us a chance. And I feel like when given the chance and we get the feedback, we do our best to address issues. Right. So overall, I feel like the quality control from when I started here to where it is now is far and away better than when we initially started working on or developing OE solution parts that were previously only available at the dealer. And with that said, a lot of the parts we're doing now are also a lot more and more complex. I mean, we're writing our own software on some of these modules. So right. Even though we've grown from a standpoint from a quality standpoint, there's obviously a long way to go, but we definitely are heading in the right direction. And, you know, whatever influence you may have or contacts, you know, I always reach out and try to expand my sphere of influence. And that sphere is, hey, look, if you have a challenge or a problem with the part, you know, don't just throw it out or sometimes return it without any information. You know, reach out to us and let us know, because a lot of times we'll even pay for the defect credit to get the failed part back, because it's very challenging to get failed parts back through our customer distribution system.
Really?
It is. And even when we do, well, here's why. But part of it is a failure on our part that we're trying to make a change. We have quite a few customers that do a defect credit based on their sales volume. So as an example, they'll just scrap defective parts.
Right.
So that's one challenge. The second challenge is when we do get the parts back, there's no story behind it. So it's really tough to isolate or figure out where we should even go and then what the problem is. So we rely heavily on our own defect rates of what comes in from the customer that we get, that we can see and quantify to put on there. So what happens a lot of times is we'll hear a lot of noise around the part. We won't have the rest of the story or the pieces, so there's nothing for us to do. In some cases, though, we will when we hear a lot of noise, when it reaches a certain threshold from a percentage, 3-4% defect return, Then what we do from that point is we will pull 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 samples and do some tests, definitely materially, definitely dimensionally. And then again, depending on the noise and what we find from the first checks, then it'll even go on to a vehicle trial.
Well, so that's really interesting to me because it reminds me of a situation, and not with your company, but a situation years ago. I had an ICP sensor, and the vehicle would get to operating temperature and it would stall, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I continually said over and over again, I can see it's the sensor. I can promise you I have 5-volt, I have ground, I have a signal. And when it gets hot, it pulls down my VREF and my ICP goes down. I can unplug it and I get VREF back. And I can manually control my signal, right? In other words, I can force it to 5 volts and I can force it to 0 volts. So I know it's the sensor. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The sensor's shorting to ground. Here's the scope captures. I don't know what more you could want from me. And they're like, listen, we don't know what any of that means. And I said, well, okay, I'm trying to tell you what that means. I'm trying to explain the part is bad. And they said, look, after 3 of them, there's no way it's bad. I said, no, I'm telling you it's bad. I can go get a different sensor. I can go get a Ford sensor and put in the truck and it doesn't do it anymore. And they said, that's great, but that doesn't mean anything to us. After 3, it's your fault. It's not the part. I said, I don't think you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, no.
You know? So it seems like there's a disconnect between the parts company and it's interesting because David actually has a really strong parts store background, right? He's not just a shop owner. Dude's pretty smart when it comes to the way parts stores operate. David, what say you?
About what?
God, you're awful.
We said we'd put it in the tote and send it back. I don't know what happens to it when it gets to the DC. You assume it's going to get back to the manufacturer, but and half the time the vendors would come around and you'd go, hey, I can't sell your line of whatever. Way back when, I've told the story before, I think. It was window regulators last were for Dorman.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically that 96 to 2000 minivan. And this was a while ago, obviously, right? So we're selling these window regulators and they're blowing up. I don't know what chassis it is, like Buick Regals, the LeSabre, Impala, that body style at GM. Same situation. We're selling regulators. You had to stock 4 or 5 of them because you knew most of them would come back, and they would last 3 or 4 or 5 months, and then you'd get the call and you'd send another one out, and then maybe another one a few weeks later, and the shops were like, what's going on with these things? But to Dorman's credit, they said, hey, we found our problem, and they put this big press release out, and they were going around to the stores and they were announcing what they were doing and like, hey, we're rolling these things up, a bajillion times, and we know that they're not failing. We've fixed the roller issue, the cable issue, this, that, and the other, and you stopped having issues with them. I mean, they made a concerted effort to fix the window regs, but you don't always see that with most of the lines. And not to pick on Dorman, but I'm talking about any of the vendors. There's like 4 or 5 huge vendors that sell most of the parts in these parts stores. I mean, most of your electronic components, or ignition components, brake components, even there's just a few vendors, and everybody private labels them or whatever. If there was a high failure rate in something, I mean, at the store level, you just sold something else, or you would steer the shop away from it. You'd say, hey, you don't want to buy this. You just wouldn't sell it. And, it just wouldn't get out there because you didn't want to hear it from the shop. And the shops would lose confidence. And half the time, these shops don't realize. They're just like, oh, I'm just going to buy from the other parts store. I used to get that. And you're like, hey, that other parts store, I know it's in a Napa box, but it's the same thing I'm selling. There's no difference. It's the exact same vendor, the exact same manufacturer. It's the same part in the box. It's just a different, label on it. These parts stores, or some of the shops, just they didn't know. They just thought it's switching. And the ones that you'd look at a little cross-eyed at is the ones that would say, well, ever since I switched to so-and-so, I haven't had any issues. It's like, dude, it's the same stuff. What are you doing differently? But, you don't always see the vendors going out there and I don't know, talking to the end user and finding out what the challenges are from our end. Does that make sense?
No, it does totally, and it's funny you bring up the window regulator story, and I'm happy that it did get to you regarding the message was sent, because there are still technicians out there that won't use a regulator, because quite honestly, we had a lot of issues in the beginning that need to be addressed. So that's comforting to know that, but we're definitely taking the same approach on regs for everything, but regs were easy to fix. And what I mean by that is there was such a problem. We got so many failed parts back. And then we developed a strategy, right? There's over 2,500 SKUs. We developed our own homegrown lab of used salvage doors where, like you said, we tested it a bajillion times up and down to make sure that they would meet the requirements of the end user and the technician. And almost, instantaneously when the new inventory started coming in, it was a night and day difference. And what I like to say is, we take that approach across any of the products where we can definitively say, like the example you gave, Lucas. I'm not going to say that there's not a bad apple here that would say, well, if you tried 3 of them, it can't be the part. To me, I would say the other way. Like, look, you've tried 3 of them. Let's get one of the failed parts back and send you out an OE, just because you tried so many to figure out what the heck's going on. We don't mind eating some crow if we are wrong, if it is something else. Because at the end of the day, a technician that says they've checked the 5-volt reference, they're knowledgeable, we should always listen to them. We've gotten better at that. But I'm sure we've had some techs here in the past that probably may have given that same message. Training is really important. And also, so is that insight of not getting defensive when somebody bashes your product, and kind of understanding where they're coming from. I mean, for an automotive company to tell you that their ICP sensor, they didn't know what a 5-volt reference meant, they probably should have had somebody on standby to help them out technically to get that feedback.
Well, and I think that's so much of what we see is that nobody ever calls to try and rectify that problem, right? And I think we get so fast paced in the shop, and we've just got to go. The technician throws it in a box and says, "This doesn't work," right? And then it gets sent back. The service advisor, he's slammed too, so he just makes a claim and sends it back to the parts store, and that's the extent of it. Right? Nobody ever truly goes through and follows up and calls the helpline and says, "Hey, listen, I've had 3 problems with this part, and here's what I see. Here's what's going on." Right? Nobody ever takes the time to do that. Now, I think that's what it takes to improve the part quality outside of the OE. I think that especially right now where we're dealing with OEs where it's really hard to get parts, there's definitely got to be a source for parts outside of the OE, because we can't wholly depend on them. Right?
The stuff in stock half the time.
Do what?
They don't have the stuff in stock.
I know.
The OEs.
Yeah.
Even if you wanted the all OE parts, like, you're not getting your hands on it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, like I can call my dealers and they're like, "You think we have brake pads and rotors from the manufacturer here?" Sorry, we don't. We get those from Advance. We get those from Napa.
Exactly.
Listen, we got the same problem you do. That's where we're.
But it's not even like, I'm not even talking about brake parts. I mean,
no, I know.
They hold stuff back for themselves, right? We ran into this with an intake manifold on a 5.0 Ford. They were having problems with them, and so they were going through them pretty quick. And COVID hit and all that stuff, and they didn't have any. They had some in stock. They just weren't releasing them to the independent repair shops. They were holding them back for their own customers. Some of them were selling them on eBay. And because
for a premium.
Yeah, no. This is a stupid part. They were going to sell it to me at a higher price than what you would pay for on eBay. And you can see where it's going. I mean, you can see that, or where it's coming from. You can see the vendor. Like it gives you the name of the dealer. And so you call the dealer and say, hey, this is in stock because you guys are showing it in stock. If I order it through eBay, can I just come down and pick it up? Oh no, our eBay department and our regular parts department, they're not connected, this, that, and the other. And they just give you some BS. So I said, fine, okay, whatever. I still ordered the part. They canceled the part on me
Oh, that's awful.
because they saw who it was going to. And they said, oh, we can't release this part to you. We need it. It's been promised to a customer. No, it hasn't. So, I mean, even they'll stock high failure parts because they're doing warranty work. And it's just whatever moves, which I get. So sometimes you get this other part that comes in that maybe is a lower pop code, and it would sit at a parts store because the vehicle's older, it's outside of the dealer sort of, network. It might sit at the parts store. The dealer's not going to have it. It'll show up at your shop, and then what? Were you having to wait 3 to 5 days to get that part in, or you just call the local parts store and get it today? So
Correct.
we can't relying solely on OEs. Not going to work.
No, I don't think you can
not
do
a
it if you
solution.
tried. No. And so, Lester, you said something really interesting to me when we first met, and you were talking about the fact that you have so many different components, right? You were talking about how many you actually have. Share a little bit of that thought process that you were sharing with me when we were talking about that, because we were talking about quality and talking about there's definitely been some quality control issues, right? And I think that's the thing that we really wanted to make sure we covered, because there's so many people who talk about Dorman, and it's like, it's kind of become a common theme, right? Some of it is probably not deserved. It's just because technicians on internet forums talk about, or Facebook groups talk about Dorman, right? It's a poor quality part, and it's just the name they have. So everybody gets on that bandwagon and bashes it. Or what is it? BWD, broken when delivered. So talk a little bit about that, because you brought up some really interesting facts about how many.
Heard that one.
Jeff Compton said it the other day. Talk a little bit about how many different parts you have and how that plays into this, because I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't want it to come off as an excuse. But the reality is, I think we have a very unique business model. I mean, I respect all of our competitors, SMP, Wells, BWD, Cardone. There's a lot of great competitors out there, and we're all in this, trying to supply parts to technicians. But I think what really differentiates us, I mean, there's no one close to our portfolio. I mean, you're talking 200 different part categories. Forget about SKUs. I mean, you're up in if you take private label out, I mean, you're up at 70, 80, 90,000 SKUs. So when you're looking at the engineering capabilities you need, the supply chain capabilities, and then just even from a quality control standpoint, you have something from a key fob case cover that can really help your customer out instead of replacing a whole key fob, all the way up to a transmission control module for a 6T GM transmission module that at one point we would offer a actual software swap tool. So there's a lot that goes into the development of those products. So again, I'm not making excuses up, but when you look at all the things that go into quality control, there's billion dollar companies out there, or $500 million, that have 3 or 4 part categories in the automotive aftermarket. So that really is a continual challenge for us, but it's also we believe is one of our big benefits that we offer to the end users. If you think about it, we're very agnostic on parts. There isn't anything, I'm not knocking a Wix, but when you think of Wix, you think of filters. They're a fantastic company. There's been a lot of acquisitions, Hummel and all that, but that's what their product manager focuses on. What's really cool, it's in our culture, whether you're on a sales team or a product team, we always leave the customers, whether it's the technician, if we're doing a call, or a WD or a jobber, and ask the question, what can Dorman do better? And followed up after that question, and that has to do with anything, whether it's supply chain, marketing, pricing, quality. And the second question is, what are you going back to the dealer for? If it's a direct customer, we say, what do you have to say no for? And because of our business model, where we're manufacturing light, we do own manufacturing now, but we're not heavy in manufacturing. We're able to pivot and basically focus on any part that's in demand by automotive technicians that was previously, or that is dealer only at the time. So I guess,
kind of crazy.
I've been with Dorman for a long time. I'm really proud of that, but it definitely has its challenges around quality. And then going back to your window regulator story, you could have 190 of those categories are very high quality, and then you have that one that really, we missed the mark on for whatever reason. We copy the OE design, we don't totally understand the failure point, and then boom, here it is. 6 months later, we have a huge problem with it, and we're doing our best to address it. But then that technician takes that and spreads it across all the different categories we have. So that's why it's really important for our team to make sure that we know that we do want to know when that customer has a problem with an ICP or whatever the part is, so we get the part back, analyze it, and then get it corrected as soon as possible. With the tech line, the first thing I say is that we have to get that customer, once we validate there's an issue with the part, as best we can, we have to get that customer fixed first. But just as important is they have to close the loop on, well, what are we going to do about future parts that are sitting on the shelf today? What's the issue? Was it an anomaly? Was there a date code issue with the manufacturer, the manufacturing process? What are we going to do to close the loop to make sure that another customer doesn't have that same problem again?
Right. Well, and it seems like there's been a little bit of a shift, right? So I was talking to my friend Tanner a while back, and we were talking about a Dorman component, and he said, I honestly think Dorman's trying to listen. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I really think things have changed with them. He said, there's this Facebook group, and it seems like people at Dorman are actually trying to get feedback and communicate with us as professionals. He said, I don't think that's ever happened like it has. So it seems like something's changed. Is that something that you saw internally that changed, or is this something that's been there all along?
So I believe it's been there all along, but the change was that group that Tanner was invited to. And I think we have over 500 members now. I'm really excited about it. And whoever wants to join it is more than welcome. It's a private group. And I think it's allowed people like Eric, at South Main to actually reach out to me now. And others that didn't believe that we were going to put, basically put the money where our mouth is and say, hey, this is what we're going to do and fix it. So it's about 500 or so different members. And we actively go out there and say, look, although our main goal is to uncover new ideas, you can't separate the quality component from that. So what I've always told leadership here and everything else, sometimes we would get feedback and say, man, Lester, you guys got to, your main goal is to find ideas. And what I tell them is you can't separate addressing quality and pull through from ideation. So what I mean by that, the two biggest concerns we get when we visit shops are, hey, they remember a challenge you had with our part, or hey, your part's not available yet in my area or network. It's great when I see these cool new things you come out with, but I can't get my hands on all of them. So we have to act as advocates out there in the field to help on both those fronts, to really get the buy-in from ideation. So where I'm going with this is, if you're on that channel, we openly throw all those offers out there. When somebody comes on there, we have the trolls, and we actually like the trolls that are on our forum because they keep us honest, and we never kick anybody out unless they are abusive language or something along that lines. But if they find something and they document it and they send us pictures, there's no questions asked. We send them the replacement part or the OE. If we're not comfortable, we get the failed part back, and we follow up with the group on what we've done with the situation. So that's why I believe people like Tanner, who was recommended me through Jerry, Jerry Trulia, really have seen the difference. Because again, we've really put action to our words to address these issues. So to answer the second part of your question is, I think it's always been there, but now it's getting a lot more momentum. So we're getting a lot more exposure with this Facebook group. It's only about 2.5, 3 years old now.
Yeah, that's I kind of picked up on that. Right. And I thought it was really cool to get in there and kind of see how you guys are responding, because I think, when you get on the internet and you start talking to people, And for instance, the other day, and I don't mean to hammer on Dorman here. The other day,
No, you
I
can.
saw,
Please. I'm used to it, and I actually would rather hear it because I can guarantee if it's something that sticks in my head or you have enough information, I'm going to hunt it down tomorrow. But go ahead. No, and
well,
don't feel like you have to qualify it with that.
no, it's just that for instance, terminology, right? And somebody said, "Hey, that engine company is the equivalent of a Dorman engine rebuilder." It's like I wouldn't buy an engine from them. And what I mean by that is so many times we get in these talking circles, right? And they talk about the same things, or we constantly go around and around, but many people have not had the same experience, or they've not truly looked into that experience, right? Now we've all had issues with all different brands, right? And it makes me wonder about quality control as a whole, not just Dorman. I've had Cardone problems. I've had BWD problems. I've had, problems in all different lines when it comes to parts. So I can't just look at one and say it's that. I think Dorman kind of got that reputation, and it's kind of become a running joke, if you will. I don't know that it's all deserved. One of the really cool things for me, though, when I joined that group, is I started seeing there were a lot of like kind of cool innovations, like the Explorer rear wheel hubs
Mm-hmm.
that you don't have to kill yourself to get the bearing out of.
Right.
I've not used one. I'm not saying I have, and not saying I wouldn't. I'm just saying I haven't used one. I don't know about it. If it suffers from quality issues or not. Subaru rear wheel assemblies or rear wheel hub assemblies, where it's got the backing plate and everything.
Yep.
That's kind of cool for a technician. And I think that's really thinking ahead, because, when we do stuff like that here, what we find is, oh man, the technician forgot to order a backing plate and it's trashed. It's rusted out. And oh man, that part's not in there, and that part's not in there, and that part's not in there. And I got to order all these things. And now we have all this time in it. And then the darn thing takes forever to come apart. So those kind of innovative ideas are really neat to me, right? I think that's a really cool concept. And I think that, like I said, in a lot of ways, some of these quality concerns aren't warranted. Um, it's the way of the internet, right? I mean, look at the shops that you see that have all bad reviews. I'm sure they earn some of that. But in the same respect, if one person has a problem with the shop, then you look in a Facebook group and all of a sudden everybody in that town has a problem with that shop because they did something somebody disagreed with,
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like, in my opinion, the reverse of a brag list that I keep and I share with different members of our leadership team, because I think sometimes they're not out in the field as much, that are exactly the same phenomena happens, right? Somebody big out there, one of the big influencers, whether it's Motor City Mechanic, who I have a good relationship with, David Pike, I like him, Erico, whoever, post something, and then it's disheartening. I used to take it personally. Now I don't. Within a day, there's 50 comments that are all just, it's everything from, I love Dorman because they keep me in business. The first shop puts it on, and I get to fix the part, and all kinds of slander. And I don't know if you've gotten a chance, but I make it. There's a couple people from our ambassador group on other forums that will tag me. And I'll tell you this, I've put a dozen or so feelers out there directly at people, very, very, what I think is contrite and supportive of, hey, you know what, I'm really sorry this happened. Any information you can give me, I know the car's probably long gone. I'd love to make it right. What can I do? And I tell you, if I even I don't get anything back. So my perception is 80% of that is just noise of somebody wanting to say something, based on the limited ones I've responded back to that were pretty hateful. And I literally get either no response back, or, man, that car's long gone, I'm not dealing with you, all your parts are junk. And there's nothing substantial after I've kind of reached out and said, hey, look, I'm really apologetic. That shouldn't have happened. Regardless, I'd like to, next time you have your vehicle, or there's a vehicle in the shop, you can wait a couple of days for, I'll send you a part free of charge to kind of make up for it, and even cover the labor if there's any issues with it. And again, I get crickets.
So let me ask you this. I've not been using Dorman parts. I've got to be honest with you, right? I got scared. I had some things happen, And it's to the point that I don't even remember what they were now. It was years ago. I've not been using Dorman parts in years. And so if a shop wanted to truly help fix the problem, right? We continue to see that, like I said, not just Dorman, lots of aftermarket companies have problems. How do we help fix the problem, right? Because that's one of the big things about the podcast is that a lot of times it's easy to get caught in a talking circle where it sounds like we just talk about the problems over and over and over again, right? What steps can a shop take? And, we've talked a little bit about documenting things well and providing that documentation. I've found that a lot of part stores aren't truly supportive of that, right? They're busy too. They just want to get the car out of their way, or the client out of their way, if you will. How do we begin to be part of the solution instead of just another number?
Yeah, so that's definitely the $1 million question. I First and foremost, we always like the conversation to interact with who you purchase the part from directly, and if there's anything we have to do to educate that customer on even how to do, we always hate talking about labor claims or the defect return process. That would be number one, is to make sure that you try at least first with your customer directly. Even though I always prefer to get the part back, that's typically the right way to try to handle it in the beginning. Now, if you don't feel like you're getting an answer or they're not willing to help you, that's when I encourage everybody. I'll even put my number out there directly on your podcast, and people can call or email me directly. Some people laughed or scoffed at first, but we're able to, with our team here, we have 6 tech line specialists in addition to our customer service line. We'll do our best to address anything that comes our way. So whatever you think would be the best venue to put, whether it's my contact information out there or our tech line. I mean, I'll address these issues head on. Like I said, I don't have any sales responsibility or product development. The main focus is new ideas, but I truly believe that this is a big component of winning people over, to have them comfortable with providing new ideas. They have to be comfortable with using the product. I mean, the fact that you said here, I know you're very successful. You've stopped using our parts altogether, and you're not. I'm sure there's others like you. So
right.
I would say direct contact would be the best way. The other thing too that I would say, Lucas, I don't know how you could get this. It always amazes me on how many people don't call the manufacturer until it's their 4th one.
Right.
Just pick up the phone and give us a shout. I mean, like, yeah, I'm on my 4th one in 2 weeks and it hasn't worked yet. So if we can get that message out there, like the first time you see something like that ICP story that you kind of told me, and I'm not picking on you now, I'm just basically saying if there's something definitely wrong, yeah, maybe order the second one. But then from that point forward, like, there's got to be something going on with the part, whether they're the date code or the manufacturing or something that we have to look further into. Maybe I've run into many instances where somehow the application information got jacked up and the part will work properly. It's just it's just showing the wrong vehicle in that customer's catalog system now.
Right. So that's a really interesting point, is that there's a lot of points of contact. You know what I'm saying? There's from you all the way through the parts store, through the cataloging system, all the way out to the shop owner, the service advisor, the technician. There's a lot of points of contact for that all the way through. So that's a really interesting point, is that
the problem though, Lucas, and then I'll play the devil's advocate here, is like, who has time to call? Like, nobody has time to call. So we had a Honda Pilot in here with a VVT issue, and if you look at the Honda website and you look up the part, like, they wanted to sell you this monstrosity of a part. It's like $400 or some garbage like that. And it was just like this one small component of that solenoid assembly that had failed. And if we just get this one part, well, guess who sells it? Dorman has that part available. But the technician's like, you really want me to install this? And I'm like, let's see if it works. Well, guess what? The thing didn't work out the box. We had a problem with it. It technically fixed the problem we were having, but then created a different issue that we didn't have there before. And then the technician has to do the diag, and he digs into it, and he's like, this thing is not working properly, this part of it here. I'm being very vague because I don't remember the exact details. But here's the thing. So let's assume that everything that we want to help the situation, say, okay, well, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm not trying to sound like an a-hole here, but like, there's no incentive for me to send the part back to Dorman. Like, I don't care. I'm just going to chuck the part or send it back to the parts store and say, hey, this part's junk, and then go chase an OE because I got to get the car fixed. Like, the customer just wants their car back. But let's say that I set it aside and I do have time to then call and say, hey, we had to install it, caused a different problem than what we had originally. Can I send it back to you? Where's the incentive? Like, nobody's going to want to do that. There's other than the people that are quote unquote ambassadors, right? And I have no idea how the program works, but I'm just saying, other than those guys who are in some way being incentivized, even if it's through social media clout or support of their channels or YouTube channels or whatever, right? There's no incentive to the average everyday shop owner to send that part back and say, well, I really want Dorman to make a better product. Like, they're just going to go find some other manufacturer that will sell them a part that isn't going to fail out of the box, or has a lower chance, or even if it's not even that, it's just a matter of confidence, right? So, how do you cross that bridge first, right? So we have to cross that bridge. You have to say, well, we can come up with a program and this, that, and the other. Doesn't it really come down to the parts vendor? Isn't that like shouldn't that be your main focal point? I'm going to talk to the parts vendor. I'm going to say, hey, everything has to be separated out, especially if it's coming from an installer, especially if it's coming from a good installer, because there were plenty of shops back in my day that had extremely high warranty percentages, and you knew that they were part swappers. Like, they had no idea what they were doing. They weren't installing the parts properly. They would just throw parts at it until it worked. I'm not talking about those shops. I'm talking about the shops that they have a really low warranty percentage, but they do send back, part XYZ for whatever reason, maybe set them back, and then they go back to Dorman. Like, is that just something that you guys negotiate up front? And that's why they just don't get them back. Like, the parts, I knew the parts store had to eat a certain percentage of them. You guys just kind of negotiated that into the price of the deal.
Right. I would say for the most part that we do get a lot on the traditional side. We do get a lot of the defective, defective parts back, at least enough for us to have the part number or the SKU information. I think the challenge, though, is not having that story all the time and not being able to try every part on a vehicle, because we don't know. Like, that issue that you said with the Honda Pilot would be one that, unless we knew any difference, I assume if it's that separate solenoid where you don't have to buy the whole variable valve timing VTEC assembly or the solenoid. Mm-hmm. That's one, without a little bit of that backstory. But you brought up something interesting about the incentivizing I never really thought of, and then mentioning our customers, your suppliers. If we could somehow, because if you think about a really good salesperson, when we do field work with them, they're calling us because they know we want to know, or even just a good salesperson in general. And I'm not saying that there's a ton of bad salespeople out there, but I feel like the good ones follow through and let the manufacturers know when they have an issue where it really hurts one of their, like you said, they know who their top shops are, the good shops that are diagnosing, and they really know there's an issue with the part. So I think getting some kind of program.
You need to put some pressure on these parts vendors
to make
these parts stores are taking these salespeople off the street. They're pulling them out, and they're sending out kids. This has been a constant issue. I was in a parts store, it's been 10 years, right? And not here in the current market that I'm in, but the market I was in before, I had a professional. The guy hustled. He was doing 25 calls a day, and he would go out, and if there was a problem, he would bring it immediately back to you, because that was his customer just as much as it was your customer. He got to chuck a chunk of his store sales as a commission check. He wanted to make sure that the store was growing. And he especially took care of the stores that were growing and that took care of their customers, so he didn't have to do nothing but listen to complaints the entire day. And so he was a professional. I think he's retired at this point. You don't see those guys out on the field anymore. Instead, you have, at least from the big box stores, you're sending kids out, or they're sending somebody out that's like upper level management that has 85,000 other responsibilities, and they don't have a dedicated sales crew, and you might see them once a year. Hey, we rolled out these new alternators, and we'll pay for the tow and 100% labor plus another $50 for your trouble and this, that, and the other. It's like, great. That's great that you're incentivizing me using this, but I don't want the part to fail. Like, I really don't want the part to fail. I don't care that you're going to pay me labor again at 100% of my labor rate, and I don't care that you're going to pay for the tow. Like, I just don't want the part to fail. I got to have confidence in what I'm doing. What's that?
Because it's so embarrassing.
It's embarrassing, yeah.
It's horrible.
So part of the value proposition that we put forth as shop owners is part selection. I should know, as a professional, having installing hundreds of thousands of dollars in parts every single year, I should know what fails and what doesn't fail. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't want to be the hacky shop up the street that's just going to install whatever's cheap and available. That's not what I do. And those shops are fine. They don't care that the part fails. The car just comes back for another trip, and they'll sell some more off that car. That's not how we approach the vehicle. And maybe we're in the minority. I have no idea. I hope not. But we take the approach that we're the professionals. We're going to recommend a certain level of part that we have confidence in, because we're putting our name on it. We're putting a long warranty on it, and we don't want the part to fail. And so our approach is, I want that part to last as long as the original one did. If I install that, whatever, I know that part will last as long as the original one did. And so a lot of part stores, it's almost, it's almost a sense of elitism. It's like, oh, I only install OE. Well, why is that? So I want to make sure that the part doesn't fail. If the original one lasted 150,000, I want the new one to last 150,000. I love the philosophy. I don't know that OE is necessarily the case. And you being an ideation, I almost wonder, like, is the push so much?
You need to repeat what you just said. You cut out.
Did I really?
Yeah.
I was on a roll. What do you want me to do? I can't pick back up. I'm screwed. I almost wonder, you being an ideation, I wonder, like, is the emphasis, and I know you have to, like, we're here beating you up and you have to answer for Dorman, but I wonder if is the emphasis first to market, and that's always been the emphasis, first to market with, what do you guys call them? OE solutions,
right?
Only available from the dealer, no longer available from the dealer. But I mean, realistically, I just want you to look at it from my point of view, from the shop that takes the mentality that once it's fixed, it's done, and they take pride in that. It's important. It's not about the profit. It's not about the dollar in the bank account. It's I fixed that. It's never coming back with that same problem for the next 150,000 miles. You would not believe the percentage of shops that take that approach to repairs. They'd rather lose money than lose clout. Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense. And I was on a separate, more informal conversation with Tex, and I get it. And I always try to empathize with you. And that's why, it's funny, because the same story you tell is a story that I kind of tell. Like, look, that technician's customer doesn't know a thing about, it's a Dorman part, it's a Cardone, it's a BWD. All they know is that original part was on that car for 15 years. Now, David and Lucas installed this aftermarket part, or whatever part. They have to really know what aftermarket means. They installed this part, and 4 months later, they have the same problem again. So that's a huge issue, and that's was a big impetus for the Facebook page, for us trying to get failed parts back, for us to make sure that doesn't happen, that the part does meet or exceed that technician's and then your customer's expectations. Because again, the customer's going to blame it on you. You can't sit there and say, oh, it was that cheap Dorman part, it was the cheap BWD part. They're they're not going to buy that because they don't understand. Or I'm not saying all of them don't, but many of them don't understand that. They just think that you didn't fix their car properly. So I totally get what you're saying. It is a sense. I've been kicked out of. I'm not proud of it, but I've been kicked out of many shops. Some of them I've converted over to be ambassadors, and some of them are kind of the same way. They just said, "Look, I've had some challenges, and it's not worth wasting my time." And it's not just Dorman; it's other aftermarket companies where they've spent a lot of time and got burned on it. So I totally get it, and I'm the question that Lucas posed earlier, what do we do about it, and your idea about incentives, I like all that. To me, there's no either or approach. We really have to attack it at all levels, whether it's with our direct customers to get better at getting the defective parts back, with the technicians to try to make it easier for you to give us that information, whatever it takes, because it is important. And the reality is the OEs are going to continue, in my opinion, to make it more and more challenging for you to fix these vehicles as they become more and more complex. So we have to have strong aftermarket suppliers that can meet the demands of tomorrow's type or next generation parts on these vehicles.
Again, playing devil's advocate though here, why the shift? Because you guys are a huge company and you guys have been doing just fine. Selling the way you've been selling and doing the things the way you guys, and a lot of times you're the only one that sells the part, other than going to OE. And sometimes OE's like, hey, you got to buy this entire assembly. You got to buy half the car. Half the car needs to be purchased in order for you to fix this screw. This one screw's missing, and you got to buy half the car. And you're like, well, I could do that, or I can install this Dorman OE solution kit there that replaces the one screw, and I'm done.
I think
why shift to like all of a sudden we got to be high quality as well.
It's interesting you said that, and I love the devil's advocate, David. I don't like earlier when we talked about. I don't think it's a shift. I think it's always been a mindset, and it's always been iterative, and we know we have to get continually better. Because there's definitely there has to be a level of quality when you open up that part you mentioned earlier. It can't be defective out of the box. And I think what a lot perceive as a shift is just something where we're being more vocal about it. We have grown those departments, and we have extra bandwidth now to focus on it over the years. I mean, when I started with Dorman, I mean, you say that in early 2000, a lot of us we were very new at this. We were very much a sourcing company that tried to apply quality control to off the shelf parts. There's been a complete shift now where we're getting the ideas, we're doing the tool, we're really a design and tooling firm that also has some manufacturing around complex electronics. So with those capabilities, I mean, we've expanded our quality control and engineering departments 20, 30 fold from what it was 17 years ago when I started. So I think that's what people perceive as a shift. It's a mindset that you're seeing that has a lot more momentum because of social and because of how we've grown as an organization. And a lot of those individuals haven't really seen any of that. It's kind of like, it's just something they haven't seen. So that's why we've invited many technician groups, even individuals, out to visit our facility to understand our development process. I don't know if you're familiar with manufacturing APQP, very similar to what OEMs do. When you specify, when you're developing a part, you have to essentially follow all the steps from getting that part, making sure that you understand what the material is, what the dimensions, how the material is used, all the functions of the parts before you even start development. And then the cool thing about what we do extra is we take the technician feedback on, like what you said, whether it's, hey, replace the piece, not the assembly, or by the way, this thing always fails because it's plastic. I mean, we've had tremendous success and very low defect rate. No one talks about the lines where you don't have challenges with the categories that is, like our heater hoses where we've upgraded the plastic to aluminum, things of that nature, or the whole entire thermostat housings that we've converted from plastic to aluminum as well. So
that's pretty cool.
I think that answered your question, but I know I went off on a little tangent.
That does answer my question. I'm happy with that answer, actually.
And I mean, I didn't
So
realize
I
that
actually
you had
do
those
use
conversions.
what's that?
I didn't even realize. I guess I've just stopped looking at the Dorman part of the parts book. I didn't know they had those conversions. I probably would have
No,
tried
you're
them.
installing Dorman parts. You don't even realize that half the time. I do use Dorman part. I mean that's well, that's what I was talking about, Lucas. Like most of your brake hardware from most of your parts stores are Dorman. It's
Yeah, and
Dorman.
I
Like,
listen.
and
I'm
same thing with
okay
like
with that,
brake
right?
hoses and wheel cylinders, and where are you getting lug nuts if you're not installing Dorman lug nuts? Everybody sells Dorman lug nuts.
yeah,
There's
and
no other option out there.
Oh, you brought up lug nuts. So again, I'm not. You guys are beating me up, so I'm just trying to give it back to you. I mean, we essentially corrected Ford and Chrysler's huge problem. Our best selling lug nuts now are the ones that aesthetically look just like their two-piece design, at a lesser cost. Where the big issue, I'm sure you've run into it, your technicians, where that aesthetic stainless steel cover just spins and spins and spins, and you have
Yep.
to fight with all 20, 25 lugs to pull them off. And that's one of our best sellers. Just running some reports now on those, and we're doing very well with them. We have probably several dozen now. We've converted over to one piece, but looking at it, you couldn't even tell the difference.
Yeah, Dorman is not on my 100% do not fly list. Okay, there's definitely some Dorman things we buy. I don't buy like electronics and things like that. There's only one company on my do not buy list. You know who it is?
No, I don't.
Flight Diesel.
Who is it?
Flight Diesel.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
They years ago, and I say that jokingly. I don't really mean it. Years ago, I went through 5 turbochargers on a 6.7 liter Cummins because they were the only ones on market with this turbocharger. I went through 5 of them, and they finally said, "Listen, we got to be honest with you. We don't know how to fix it, and we know the turbo's bad. It doesn't work. We put it on a truck here, and it still doesn't work. But we don't know what to tell you to do. I guess you're going to the dealer. Great." They don't have one either. Thanks.
I guess that ends up being the issue with Dorman, and not just Dorman. I mean, again, it's a little bit of everybody. Dude, I'm on my 3rd purge valve for a Hyundai because the OE is like 2 to 3 days out. I can't get my hands on it, and this stupid
And by the
things
time
work for a year.
by the time you go through it, you could have had an OE purge valve anyway.
I know. I should just order one and keep it in stock. But here's the thing: like I'm not installing the Dorman ones. I don't. I'm not trying to pick on you, Lester. It's another brand that are readily available here locally. Everybody sells, and we installed the big box store brand private label. No idea who makes it for them. Well, maybe I do. Anyway, that thing failed within a few months. She comes back in. We install an aftermarket one, and I'm like, well, this is the good one, right? No, another year later, same thing, same situation. Again, test it. The stupid purge valve isn't sealing properly. It loses its seal after some time. It throws a code. I don't know. You get so frustrated with some of this stuff, and the lady's understanding, but sometimes some of these components you almost just don't want to take the chance. Even the part could be fine and it may last 10 years without any problems, but you're almost hesitant to pull the trigger. So let's say you find out that, yeah, we can figure out a way to get these stores to send us back the story with the part so we can actually dig into it and figure out what's going on. You come up with some program or whatever. You're getting all these parts in, and you ramp up the quality, very specific components. Because just like you're saying, like if I have a failed rear axle on a pickup truck, like I'm installing a Dorman unit. Sometimes drive shafts. We just did a drive shaft on a Nissan Pathfinder. It was either OE or Dorman. Nobody else makes them, right? So, or I got to go to a local rebuilder or whatever, right? And this thing was trash. So we put a Dorman unit in. It works fine. No problems. Backing plates, just components like that. Like you were saying, the oil filter caps that are plastic, you replace them with aluminum units that don't snap in half. Other than that, you have very specific components that there's some hesitancy from the shop to use.
Yeah.
But David, is that sorry for I give my thought, but is that hesitancy? It seems to be, and I don't know if people just tell me this that are advocates of Dorman, but it seems to me across the industry, it doesn't matter what the brand is. If it's aftermarket, there's an overall hesitancy for anything
Yeah,
that's
Definitely.
electronic
absolutely.
relaed or purge
Yeah.
valve, where you're going to go down. Okay, all right.
Yeah, that's my point. Is it's not it's not specific to Dorman per se. I remember way back when fuel pumps.
Oh,
It was a
I
brand
when I
a fuel pump started with an A,
air
ends with an
techs.
X.
Yes.
Yeah,
Why did you
sorry.
Absolutely.
call them out?
I'm sorry. I worked on the counter 10 years before. I'm not. Yeah. I, go
Oh
ahead.
man, we had
I
everybody
digress.
sold that brand.
Yeah.
Everybody sold that
Bucks
brand,
for
and
pumps or
holy crap!
bucks for pumps. Yeah, we had all kinds of counter people spiffed with it and everything else. We actually did okay with it, honestly. I worked for Eastern Auto Parts, a local WD here, and they only had 5 locations. And we, I know that we actually went up hiring the rep here as a sales rep. I knew him for years, and he always did right by us, and we carried their pumps for quite some time.
Yeah, well, I sold a ton of AirTech pumps, but this was like back in the day, and oh man, just problem after problem, and that you would the our upper management was telling us, we're talking to the vendor, we're trying to work something out, they know they have a problem, and they came, and this is how stupid it is, and I think it's not stupid, it seems out of touch. They were so proud of their packaging, like they won awards for their packaging, the way they wrap their pumps. Screw the quality. We are now able to put this in a smaller box and take up less room on your shelf, and deliver a more secure unit because of our awesome packaging. That's what they were spending the R&D money. I guess, I don't know, I'm speculating. I don't know, but we had huge warranty rates on AirTech pumps. That's what everybody sold. And I'm talking like DIY and do it for me. It was awful. That that translated to everybody. So it doesn't matter if you bought a Delphi pump, a Bosch pump, whoever's pump you were installing, you were hesitant to put in there. And you were like, I don't know. Is this thing going to last? Is it not going to last? Is it going to be like AirTechs? Now AirTechs apparently like fixed their issue and stuff like that, but I think they soured everybody on aftermarket fuel pumps. And so now you've got some electronic components on a vehicle that, I don't know, like you're hesitant to use them, to even try it out. It doesn't matter whose brand, because you've been burned in the past by XYZ brand who didn't give a crap. They just wanted to be first to market or whatever. Like they cut a deal and they sold every parts store out there on their product, and the product was garbage. Maybe 70% of them were fine, but 30% of them were going back, which is huge, right? And so, and how do you cross that bridge now? How do you go, well, we're putting a ton of money into R&D, into our engineering department, into our quality control department. But just like you were saying, you're also putting out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of brand new SKUs. And you're first to market a lot of times with these SKUs. You see the disconnect there? It's like,
No,
okay, that's great that you're the first to market with these 75 new SKUs that nobody else has but you.
no,
But
I get it. I definitely get it. But I think with that said, it comes back to communication. And I really understand what you're saying as, when does a tech or where does a tech have time or when to provide us with that information? But I think we do need a little bit more feedback to be able to close the loop, because I think the SKUs, I think people often conflate the first to market with, we don't care about the quality, when that's not the truth. We're not going to keep going or try to come out with those parts at a poor level of quality. The right level of quality, in my opinion, is there for these new parts. And trust me, we're hungry and waiting to hear about the parts people have issues with. But that's definitely a common, in my opinion, I'm biased, obviously, a misnomer that, hey, they're just worried about, their revenue coming out with new parts, and they don't care about the quality, when in all reality, those new products coming out with are going through the most, a much more advanced quality process than we ever had. And we're also hungry and have bandwidth to address any issues that we're hearing from the field. And that's why it's interesting what you said, and also intriguing to me. And how do we do more things like the Facebook ambassador page, like working with our customers to get more of those parts back, to make it easy for a technician in the shop to take a quick picture and post it somewhere, or to provide some details so we can fix it.
So I've got a question. He brings up electronic components, and that's something that we all see. What are you seeing as the primary cause of those failures, right? Because we all hear that there's got to be a problem. And I'm sure in a lot of ways, maybe it's not as bad as we envision it. Because like he said, we've all kind of shied away from using them. Mm-hmm. Is there specific things that you're seeing that are causing these problems or were causing these problems?
I'm not as close to it. I would have to say that, every manufacturer, automotive manufacturer, uses some degree of sourcing things off the shelf, and those parts still have to go through some type of quality control. So I'm not sure exactly. I can't speak to other manufacturers where the disconnect is. I mean, there's plenty of, even before we started doing a lot of our own electronics manufacturers we just wouldn't approve. So again, I'm not trying to call anybody out. Don't know if their tolerances or what their process is, where they're just missing obvious things like that, and now they're getting out into the market. But that would be something that I'd have to better understand, like or have better insight into, because I'm not really sure what's driving that 100%.
Very cool. Very cool.
I had a quick question. It was a good segue for what David was talking about. So Dorman being an aftermarket supplier, what do we have to do to get technicians comfortable using products in the aftermarket, like electronics, that you don't have any faith in, or where you've been burned before, to get your confidence back to use that product? Because our analysis shows, the more labor involved and the higher price tag, the less likely a lot of technicians are to use anything aftermarket, because they're thinking about comebacks, the part not working right, the labor time, and even the cost of the part.
You take something like VVT phasers.
Yeah. Something that can cause engine damage too.
Yeah, that sucker is not going to be aftermarket unless I absolutely have no other choice.
Yeah. To answer your question, I think if it were me, right, the things that I think about that might change my thought process is kind of what we've talked about in the podcast, right? Is you guys being open and willing to listen to our concerns, the recognition that, hey, there have been concerns, right? That there have been some things that have happened, and I don't know how to do, right? I'm not a marketing guru. David's the marketing guru. But the recognition that there have not always been 100% wins from the brand line, and really just kind of reaching out and acknowledging that and saying, hey, we're working on this. We have a system, right? There's a way we work on this. And we also, and I don't know that techs, and I don't know that a lot of people are seeing there's other products. For a while I was getting a little Dorman flyer, and I kept thinking, wow, that's kind of cool. Wow, that's kind of neat. I didn't know they offered that. And it was things that I would feel comfortable using. We don't get that anymore. So I think that a lot of it comes down to marketing, folks knowing that you've got new products on the line, and folks knowing that you're willing to listen, folks knowing that, hey, we're not just out here trying to take your money. We really do want to provide a good quality product, and we need your help to do that. I think that's important. The fact that you're willing to listen, because, one of the things we talk about on the show a lot is that as shop owners, sometimes we feel like we're on our own little island and nobody else is going through the problems that we are. And even when it comes back to parts, we kind of look at it and say, well, they don't care. They're a big company. They don't care. And sometimes the part store will make an owner or an advisor feel that way, right? Because they're not truly interested in taking care of it. They're just like, here's another part, here's another part, here's another part. Listen, this is your techs. Your techs are idiots. Here, here's another part, here's another part. I'll sell you as many as you want. Here's another part. And so it leads to everybody being frustrated. but it also leads to this concept or this feeling that nobody's actually listening to me. Does that make sense? In other words, Dorman's not listening to me because they're not even hearing me. And shop owners probably don't understand that. And not only is Dorman not listening to me, but the parts store's not listening to me because they're just throwing parts at me and telling me that this couldn't be it. At some point, there's got to be a little bit better communication. And David's right. It's really hard to do that when you are extremely busy and you're trying to get work through the shop and things are going wrong. The last thing I'm thinking about is how in the world am I going to tell you what's going on with this part, right? I'm thinking about, I got to get this car out. This person's going to be so mad at me and this is so embarrassing and it's broke. And, that's not where my thought process is. So I think it comes back to alerting others to a system or what your process is in the event something like that happens. So at least they feel like they're being heard. Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense. And the only thing that I'll just get, or not the only thing, the comment I'll make back to that is, people like yourself and David and many others like you, I respect, because you're running a business, and like you said, you're embarrassed. You just want to get the part fixed. It didn't function right. The customer doesn't know it was the part that was the problem. But what always amazes me are the people out there, and I've reached out to some that we've converted over, and many we haven't, that spend hours and hours building their social clout and complaining about the part with no intention of reaching out to us or letting us know when I reach out to them. So the flip side of that is it just amazes me how much time these people spend, and maybe because they're making money off it, and that's great, and I wish them all the best. But you'll see them like really find pictures and memes and post things and do all this stuff. It's like, man, they can't just spend 5 or 10 minutes and call our tech line after we left them the information to give us the feedback. And that just gets really disheartening.
Yeah. I think the thing I will say to those listening that might be doing that is imagine if the same was happening to your business. Right. And I have been a complainer before. I've been around David so long now, I kind of see the benefit of not being a complainer. People look at you like you're all weird and stuff. Maybe that's another reason they look at him like that.
It's fun to complain.
But, in all seriousness, I think it's really easy to become desensitized to that because, we're not really talking about anybody. And maybe social media plays a part in that because we're not really talking about someone. We're just talking about a brand name. We're just talking about a part.
Yeah,
we're just talking about
a corporation. What do you care, right?
And I think the more that we've done the podcast and the more folks we've met, the realization that most of these companies really do care about their clients and they really do want to produce a really good product. I think it's easy to lose sight of that because it's a big company and they're just up here and you don't get paid for changing a part, and the parts store denies your warranty claim, or they give you, $15 an hour or $20 an hour to change that part that took you 4 hours to change. And, all the frustration, all the things that go with it. And then it just kind of becomes a snowball. Does that make sense?
No, it does. Yep. That definitely makes sense.
I always, you've heard it time and time again, but seek first to understand. Slow down a little bit. Understand what you're talking about. Understand what's going on. And you don't always have to start with the most aggressive, mad response. Communicate a little bit. So I think that's what I would say to anybody who's unhappy with Dorman. Communicate a little bit and let's see if things, if maybe we can get a different understanding.
You know who I blame? The parts stores.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I'm not kidding. I blame these flipping parts stores.
Why do you blame the parts stores?
Because I can. You said I can complain. I'm going to complain. It's a flipping parts stores. I'm just telling you. Like, look, I got out of the parts game for several reasons, but man, if somebody wants to front a couple mil, there are several warehouses available here in Kansas City, and a very, very simple business strategy will absolutely own the Kansas City market. Carry a few lines, nothing crazy. lots of delivery drivers, good inventory. The prices don't even have to be that crazy, and that's it. Like it's these parts stores have become, they're chasing earnings, and that's it. And that's it. It's the quality is degraded. The quality of the help in the stores is degraded. The communication with the vendors. Look, when I first started, there was a really, really, really good relationship between some of the local distributors or the vendors and the upper management. You could see there was a connection there. You would go to conferences and you could have a conversation with these vendors, and they would get in contact with the upper management, and all of a sudden you would see change happen from feedback that you gave at the store level. You would see something happen, and it would, it would get across the entire company.
Give you faith in humanity.
And well, not it would motivate you to make things better. You wanted to give feedback, and it's like, hey, this is what I'm hearing from my customers, and you could take that back to the customer and say, look at these changes that have been made. And one of the examples, and it wasn't initiated from the store level, maybe it was, I don't know, but it was the window regulator thing. But you could at least go out with confidence and talk to your customers and say, hey, try this out. This is a big deal. But I don't know, as the stores started chasing expansion and earnings, and we got to push the price stock higher, and that's what it became all about. And they started putting less talented and less committed people in the stores, and all of a sudden nobody gives two flips. All of a sudden it's just warranty it out, throw it in the box or throw it out, and that's it. Nobody, like, the give a crap, like, left the building, and
David,
that was it.
I would encourage you. I assume both you and Lucas are very successful, and your first call.
Lucas, I don't know about me.
Oh, okay. So sorry. So I would think, dealing with all of our customers, that there is somebody there that definitely cares about what you just said, and they would want to be included in the conversation. And although, what I can't speak directly to what you're saying, is that if you engage or get the right person involved. I go out in the field pre-COVID and now, like, finally, at least once a month to different areas, whether it's 100 miles outside of our Colmar office here near Philadelphia, where I was in Louisiana a month ago, visiting customers. And I don't know if I just get lucky all the time, but I wind up going out with a salesperson who has great work ethic, who has great relationship with the customers. That always
Trust me, they're not putting you with their B team.
Okay, all right, but
I get the B team walking into my shop. Let me tell you, I get the B team.
But I would think,
I don't care. Like, come on, the slackjaw yokel,
that's a shame.
The mouth breather, the wall licker.
I would encourage you to do the wall licker, man. So I think Lucas said it earlier, David, to kind of, maybe you're selling, like, reach out to. I'm sure there's somebody there that cares about the money you're spending with them, or not even the money, the relationship you have.
No, my money went to the local distributor, the jobber. Like, I stopped dealing with these big retail outlets, but they're a huge customer for you guys. But it almost comes down to you guys pressuring them and saying, look, it's great, but we're not getting what we need from you guys to make sure that we are putting out the best quality product we can. And our reputation is getting tarnished because the information is not getting to us from these stores. It's because they're putting cheap labor in these stores. They could care less. They'll spend bajillion dollars on their point of sale system to essentially be a crutch for the minimum wage goofball that they stick behind the counter to be a quote unquote parts specialist. It's ridiculous. And so my money here at my store goes to the local jobber that gives a crap, and I pay I mean, sometimes I pay more. I don't care what I pay. It doesn't matter. Like, my end customer ends up paying the price anyway. So the price is what it is. I'm more concerned with the support from the store, because it does have to be a symbiotic relationship. And I'm telling you right now, like, we've had discussions on the Facebook forums with these shop owners. There was one shop owner who just, I mean, he was adamant about this. It's like, I buy everything online, and I want the best price, and I know I'm choosing the part myself. I'm getting the right part because I'm picking it myself, so I know it's the correct part, and I don't have to deal with these goons, and I could care less. Yeah, the part doesn't fail because I'm choosing the part and I'm installing it correctly, blah blah blah. But he's buying everything online, and it was the most cynical attitude towards the relationship between the parts store and the installer. And it was unfortunate, but I can see why that person got to that point. Because after I don't know when the part's going to be here. I don't know when the part's going to get there. I don't know what's going on with that. Let me send you another one. No. I don't want you to send me the third failed component, the third, purge valve. I want you to figure out with me what the hell's happening here. Are you sending these back to the manufacturer? Are you at least communicating with them that we're having an issue? My warranty percentage is almost nil. So the fact that I'm sending you back the third one should be a red flag. Why are we not having a conversation about this? Because I don't want any more junk parts from you. And if the parts store doesn't take the attitude that, yeah, this is a problem because this is important that we maintain the relationship here, because you are buying tens of thousands of dollars of parts from me a month. It's important that you're happy and that you have confidence in what I'm selling. And it's important that I'm selling a quality product. And therefore, it's important that I'm communicating with the vendor. There has to be a line of communication there. And that has disappeared from what I can tell. Other than the like super local guys.
Yeah.
Like, I buy most of my stuff from factory motor parts. I say that all the time. And the reason being that I see my sales guy on the regular. He's a professional sales guy. He doesn't sell parts and also does the selling. No. He's a territory sales guy. He goes out and he calls on shops. I can text him right now and say, hey, order this for me. And he'll take care of it in the morning. And it's only weird stuff, right? Otherwise, we'll call into the call center or we'll order it online. But I'm talking like they were pushing the splash concentrate. They've got this really neat setup where they'll hook it into the concentrate, and then you can adjust it to see how much of a concentrate you need to have, and you hook it into your water spigot, and it puts out your washer fluid. It's fantastic. Fantastic idea. They just released it. So I bought one. That's the kind of thing I'll text for. That kind of relationship, you cannot get that with the retail stores. Doesn't exist. And my complaint in that, and what has been lost in all that, is that line of communication. There's no longer, from my standpoint, at least from my perspective, I should say, there's no longer that line of communication from installer to part store to manufacturer. Like, there seems to be a disconnect there. And it's great that you're going out with some of these retailers, but they're putting you with the A crew. And ask them to send you out with some of your more problematic stores.
Well,
They won't.
It looks like we have some work to do, and you guys have given me some great feedback to work more with our partners to make sure that we're able to communicate better both ways, right? Like, when we have, like you gave the example of the window regulators, and make sure that messaging is getting out to you. And then on the flip side of that, when something happens, it's got to be easy. Like you said, they should take notice when you're a shop that has very low warranty rate, and all of a sudden you're urging them and saying, look, there is an issue with this part. Because quite honestly, you're a rare breed. What I mean by that is a lot of shops that don't want to take the time to even go that extent when they know that there's something wrong with a part, to let the manufacturer know. They have a business to run. So we have to get better at listening to you. That's the bottom line.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the ASOG podcast. If you'd like to catch these episodes early, you can do so by becoming a patron. Just go to asog.site and click on the Become a Patron Now button. Becoming a patron helps support the show, gets you several perks, and is tax deductible. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and on YouTube so you never miss any of our upcoming episodes. And as always, If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, shoot me an email. My email address is david@asog.site. That's DAVID@ASOG.SITE. Until next time.